Hello and welcome back to the Hellish of the Timeline. Oh god, that's the same intro I use for my podcast. Anyway, so welcome back. This is part 3 of the documentary series on the Finno-Korean Hyperwar. Uh, if you haven't seen the first two videos, go check them out. I spent I think 4 to 5 days on each of them. So a lot of work goes into them. And they're overall fun to make and they're fun to watch. I admit there is a bit of a quality drop within part two, but don't worry, I'm not going to make the same blunders. So, yeah, welcome to part three. If you haven't seen the first two, go watch them. But as a little preview, previously we were talking about the rise of the Proto-Finnic Agricoli Roman Cognate and Urho Kekkonen's rise to power. Today we're going to be entering the Empire of the Great Juan's rise is now today. Sorry, I had some Monster Munch. Anyway, so yeah, thank you very much for tuning in, and please enjoy your Whopper, large fries, Diet Coke, Oreo Sundae, and what else did you buy? Oh yeah, your sweet curry sauces. And thank you for coming to the McDonald's of YouTube.
알람이 울려든 ring ring 울림 서로의 눈길이 닿을 때마다 알면서 빙빙 도는데 점점 다가갔잖아 I know it's too late 난 속으로 나 다 알고 있잖아 결국에는 선을 넘게 될 거라는 걸 I'm warning to myself 막 그러면 안 돼 매번 맺혀 내 맘이 내 맘을 추월해 out of control 하늘을 감시하는 저 spotlight 빛일수록 어둠 속으로 빨려들어 끝이 보이는데 I know it's not right I can't stop me, can't stop me
To be honest with you, researching the history of the Empire of the Great Juan was far more difficult than I expected, as unlike the deep history of the Proto-Finnic Agricoli Roman Cognate, we have a proper source, and that's from Urho Kaleva Kekkonen himself. Sure, Jackie Chan was a part of the Empire of the Great Juan, but he's far more apathetic about things and just wants to stick to being the president of Hong Kong. And the information he does give is often scattered and can be full of holes, as he wants to keep certain bits of information closed. So I apologize if my reading of the rise of the Empire of the Great Juan seems far more sparse, as I'm relying on the limited information Jackie Chan is providing me, as well as using tablets, scrolls, and the odd Reddit and 4chan post. So to begin, the Empire of the Great Juan began, without knowledge whether it references the early stages of the nation or the establishment of the empire, in the period between 21,000 and 13,000 BCE, during the heights of the Holy Proto-Finnic Agricoli Roman Cognate. Probably. We're really not sure. From the known records, the Korean peninsula was conquered by the Empire of the Great Han Kingdom. The Empire, sorry, I mean the Great Juan Kingdom, who later became the Empire of the Great Juan after conquering Japan, after the clans there tried to conquer the Great Juan Kingdom, who absolutely. With this huge island chain having large deposits of a material known as Juanite, how egotistical. Can anyone see a connection to the anime Code Geass with Sakuradite? They built highly advanced weapons and used them to conquer the Chinese mainland, which was the true founding of the Empire of the Great Juan, as they now controlled thousands of miles and millions upon millions of people. So far, it was a pretty typical start of any empire. A nation conquers some land, feels good, then gets an epiphany that they were God's chosen people that were to rule the world. Then they would say they were an empire now. However, before the Empire of the Great Juan would become the second hyperpower of the globe, they would be beset by numerous problems. The first problem, perhaps the funniest, was when the Great Juan decided to invade the South Pacific, as they wanted to have island colonies everywhere, as owning islands was some sort of strange fad for them ever since they conquered Japan. So they kept going south until they reached the continent of Australia. However, as they tried to colonize it, they were suddenly attacked by the evil emus, which triggered a war between the Juan and Emu Empire, which had just begun its terrible existence in the world. The war lasted for 1,000 hours. The emus were absolutely smashed, but it also came at a terrible cost for the Huan, who lost several million soldiers that is the disease that we know as emus. Even though the Huan won, they were absolutely smashed. So much so that they decided to make the Emu Empire a protectorate, because as it turns out, emus are terrifying war weapons that would be useful in the future. After this terrible experience, the Empire of the Guituan decided to move down south again, and they reached the often forgotten lands of New Zealand. However, since this was thousands of years ago, New Zealand was a weird looking continent, as it just looked like a sheep with its head opening. Strangely enough, it was inhabited by a bunch of sheep people, like literal sheep, but they were like people, sheep people. Anyway, the Han tried to invade, suffered terrible losses like in Australia, won, then turned New Zealand into the kimchi protectorate as they realized that the sheep people ate kimchi, which is quite relatable. Go sheep people. With this, the empire of the Great Juan decided to go on some smaller conquests, and soon they had a sizable empire that stretched from the Russian Far East, Central Asia, the borders of Vietnam, all of the South Pacific, and some colonies in West Australia, even getting a border with the Limerian commune, which made their citizens living nearby suffer from nightmares for some reason. Probably has to do with something with all those weird arcane magic users. But, and this is a big but, the empire of the Great Juan would finally enter a golden age, only after a tyrannical regime. Now, this is where I get to my favorite part of any story: internal political examination.
Think fast, Chuckle Nuts!
You see, the empire of the Great Juan, even when it barely began, has been continuously ruled by the Kim dynasty. Yes, that Kim dynasty. The Kims are a powerful family, originally known for their political shenanigans and economic stewardship of the Great Juan Kingdom, before then overthrowing the Jojo dynasty of the Huan and making themselves the new rulers and allowing the formation of the empire. At the point the empire of the Great Huan halted their conquest for a while, the empire came under the control of Kim Il sung. He was a rather brutish and cunning leader who, when taking the throne after his father Kim Hyong Jik, by simply getting the Huan government to force him to abdicate, was determined to restart the territorial conquest of the Huan in order to conquer the world. However, there was one group of people who saw this, and guess who it is? I assume you're wrong. So it was the Neanderthals. Yep, the Neanderthals were smart enough to identify that Kim Il sung was going to conquer the rest of Asia. So, in their act of defiance and pure diplomatic skill, they formed the Neanderthal Confederation peacefully, armed themselves, then made a NATO style defense pact with the nations of the Indo Aryan Confederation, the Atomic States of the Indus, the Gujarati Sultanate, the Kingdom of Canada, not Canada, Canada in India, the Empire of Vikramaditya, the State of Karen, the Wa Hyperstate, the Kingdom of the Monkey King, the Empire of Djibouti, the Kingdom of Bangtang, Sen Yendin, the United Temple States of Bangkok, the Volcano Empire, and the Emu Empire, which was still a protectorate but was trying to get away from Huan domination. Together, they formed the United Organization of Free Nations Against the Tyranny of the Huan Empire, or Yofte. Yeah, Yofte. This made Kim Il sung reel back in pure rage and anger, and so he sought to get his conquest no matter what. Not only that, but he hated those darn Neanderthals, so he wanted to find a quick and easy way to exterminate them. But first, he needed an ally. Kim Il sung actually found these allies in northern Siberia, within the nations of Hyperborea and the Davide Empire. Yes, these places were real, and both of them have qualities that would make them good allies. For instance, Hyperborea was a nation ruled by the High Elves that enslaved the Dark Elves, which sounds racist. And the Divide Empire was a backwater nation ruled by vampires that worshipped the Twilight series.
For most of you, I believe there is peace, and perhaps more, waiting for you after the smoke clears. Although for one of you, the darkest pit of hell has opened to swallow you whole. So don't keep the devil waiting, friend.
In order to get their approval, Kim Il sung chose to send spies at first, but then realized that they kept being found because a Korean person looks very different from an elf and a vampire. But the Yuan Empire, using his great brilliance, claimed discrimination and racism. Just a clever tactic somehow for the time, as people actually treated each other respectfully and did not want such accusations to be upon themselves. So the Hyperboreans and the Devites quickly stopped inspecting Huan's spies to not appear offensive. As expected, this caused the kingdom of Hyperborea and the Divide Empire to fall to pro-Huanite coups. With these newfound allies, Kim Il sung took their armies and together they marched into the lands of India in order to quickly split Youth into two pieces. The youth quickly saw through this and sent the best troops they had at their disposal to the empire of Vikramaditya in order to hold a defense. But the crafty Emperor saw this, and he decided to send in a devastating strike force that struck the Neanderthal Confederation. Huan forces overran the defenses of the Neanderthals, and they commenced a huge genocide that exterminated 90% of the Neanderthal population. The first of three genocides. Yes, three. That would come later. The remaining Neanderthal population became boxed into huge scale reservations, where they would live in barbaric squalor until the second Neanderthal genocide. Now, this is where we will have a moment of silence in respect for the Neanderthals, as they would suffer this calamity over and over again. Ha! You thought I was going to let you have a moment? Well, nobody has time for that. With the fall of the Neanderthal Confederation, several nations fell or surrendered out of hopelessness to the empire of the Great Huan. Those who surrendered were the Kingdom of the Monkey King, the State of Karen, Jehute, Bangkok, Volcanu, and the Bangtang Senyadin. The only ones who were still fighting were the atomic states of the Indus, the Kingdom of Canada, the Juranti Sultanate, the Empire of Vikarandamadan, and various Indian tribes. Despite the ongoing war against what was left of the Yofde, Kim Il sung believed he had won the foundations for his world conquest. With this, the Great Juan went into a golden age. With their new lands, the new technology they made, and a brand new exploitative economic system, everything was put in place to expand his control. But more importantly, it was the economic system that allowed for his power to even survive in the first place. This new economy saw several huge corporations take over the country, like how South Korea is in modern times, how some things never change. Despite how Kim Il sung was more in the mindset that he was in control of everything, it was clear that the Huang corporations were the real power brokers. I mean, they literally forced him to go to war with the Kingdom of the Northern Specianade. Yes, they won against the Penguins, but you do not want to mess with the Specianade, as they are a mean group. But the corporations only went to war with them to get a puppet state in the island of California, and it costed a whopping 10 million lives and took 40 years to end the war. But anyway, with their power and prestige reaching new heights, the emperor and his oligarchy of corporations ruled the nation with an iron fist. They threw the people into poverty and totalitarian rule, and it stayed that way for a few thousand years. And, just like the Atlantean Pan-Euro-American Federal Imperial Union, they began to slip into decline as there were no new innovations being made, no more reasons for the loyalty of their subjects were being made. If it stayed like this, the empire of the Great Juan could have fallen into ruin and decay. But this was all prevented when three men took bold action to save the nation they loved so much. The first of the three men was the crown prince of the Huan Emperor, his name being Kim Jong Un, a charismatic and reform minded man. He was a deeply agitated person, seeing the stagnation of the empire of the Great Huan as an unforgivable crime, and the chief criminal was his own father. But he wasn't always this way. Just like his father, he started off as a cruel authoritarian, but grew to despise the way the Huan people and its subjects were being treated. He became a revolutionary, forming the Red Chamola army, and grew the army into a formidable force that could have had put up a good fight. But he still lacked the power, and I don't mean just the power of an army, but true raw power in order to start his revolution. Or that was until the two greatest fighters came into his life. These two were born in the Hong Kong Special Territory of the Empire of the Great Huan, and they were born as Jackie Chan and Bruce Lee. Both were master fighters, both were incredibly handsome, and both were capable of destroying massive armies with their punches, quite like One Punch Man. They were more than fighters, they were living gods, and the perfect weapons for Kim Jong Un. And luckily for him, they would be willing to fight. One day, Jackie Chan and Bruce Lee met the RCA while doing a propaganda shoot for the corporations in order to inspire the loyalty of the Huan people. After the shoot, the two entered a limo, and then they were then taken to a secret, dingy apartment block in Kulan City, where they would meet Kim Jong Un. Kim Jong Un explained that he was the leader of the Red Chamola Army, a group determined to reform the Empire of the Great Huan to introduce democracy and allow for equality in the empire. He then explained that he needed Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan to help him complete the army, as he needed to defeat Kim Il sung. He just needed evidence of their great power, though. Little did he know, Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan were, just like Urho Kaleva Kekkonen I, immortal gods with immense powers. So they easily proved themselves to Kim Jong Un, who was so amazed with them, ordered them to go immediately to Tiananmen Square and cause some kind of uprising in the area. But the two decided to do one better, and just decided to lay a full-on insurgency, and it started the revolution Kim Jong-un really wanted. With the bloody day of Tiananmen Square, the Red Chamola army and the Huan Emperor entered a bloody civil war that ravaged the entire empire, razing entire cities off the face of the earth. During this conflict, all the empire of the Great Huan's vassal states were separated and returned to the United Organization of Freed Nations against the tyranny of the Huan Empire, and the Neanderthals managed to bravely rebel from their reservations and quickly went through the second Neanderthal genocide. This all allowed the RCA to get millions of foreign troops and volunteers, as well as arms shipments. With these new allies, weapons, and men, the RCA and the U and the UFID began the march towards the Huan capital province, as the armies of the Great Huan were quickly surrendering or being destroyed thanks to Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan's great power. But before the RCA youth forces could march onto the capital and end the rule of the tyrannical corporations and their puppet, King Il sung, Bruce Lee betrayed them all after being offered the title of emperor by the corporations. This forced the Allied forces back and started a huge battle all across the Chinese provinces. Ashamed of Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan quickly gathered up a ragtag force like Star Wars and led a direct assault on Bruce. After a brutal battle, Jackie Chan finally reached the coward Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee tried to get Jackie Chan to join him, tried to lure him in with the seduction of power, but Jackie Chan, being the hero he is, refused. What ensued was an awesome martial arts fight that saw Beijing, Shanghai, and Hong Kong get destroyed simultaneously before it finally would meet its head in Hyunwoo. And this, thankfully, was replicated in My Hero Academia. So here is the fight as it was back then. Pretty epic fight, am I right? Anyway, with the defeat of Bruce Lee in Hyunwoo, Jackie Chan led the Allied armies into the Huan capital city and ended the regime of the corporations and Kim Il sung. Kim Jong un, now in power, released the Huan vassals and made peace with Yufta and reduced the Huan territories to just Siberia, China, Japan, and some parts of Southeast Asia, the Pacific Islands, and Western Australia, and gave the far eastern colonies of America their independence. Kim Jong un, Jesus, the monster munch. Yeah, beautiful. Kim Jong un then led the effort to reform the Empire of the Great Huan into a constitutional monarchy with a parliament and prime minister in order to make the people have representation. This allowed the Empire of the Great Huan to become the peaceful hyperpower of the globe, working with her former vassals to make Asia a peaceful, prosperous, and democratic place. In order to make sure this system survived, Jackie Chan became the leader of the Huanite armed forces, and he did his job well. But Jackie Chan wasn't always successful, as he had to contend with the curse of Lee, as while Bruce Lee was defeated, his soul still stayed on to fight Jackie Chan every now and then. But Jackie Chan always triumphed thanks to the power of friendship. Anyway, this system survived. Kim Jong un was a good ruler, and Jackie Chan defended the empire. Then they decided that they would spread this system across the world and began to send soldiers and settlers to the lands of Africa and the Russian steppes, only to make the frightening discovery of that was the Holy Proto-Finnic Ugric Roman Cognate. Holy Roman Cognate. Oh my god, I can never say the name correctly once. Anyway, this discovery was so traumatic for them that they invented soju and began a massive drinking problem that still affects South Korea today, although I'm not really sure about the North. This is the end of part 3 of the Finno-Korean Hyperwar limited documentary series, and we'll be continuing with the diplomatic crises that allowed the war to even happen in the first place, and hopefully we'll be able to even get into the hyperwar itself. Anyway, thank you for listening to this episode of my documentary series. And don't worry, after this section is done, I'll be working on other projects in order to continue the Hellish Other timeline from its honestly awful foundations. And also, I gotta keep making stuff, or else the entity, yes, I know the entity still is there, will murder me. So, I wish you all a nice day. See you tomorrow. Oh, and just a quick warning, there is going to be no such thing as a guaranteed schedule for uploads because, well, I have life, and also these videos take forever. No matter how crappy the quality is, they still take like several hours. Like, you know, the All Might fight I made just in, yeah, that took me like two a whole day to make. That, but I'm not saying this because I'm angry. I'm just saying it takes a long time. So please understand, and yeah, have a good day.